So, when I first heard about the situation that's going on in Palestine, Ohio, I really heard about it through a much more humanitarian lens that were people who really needed help, and the story wasn't getting out. They weren't getting the help that they needed. And this was really a situation that wasn't so different from Flint, Michigan, with the situation there that's really still ongoing so many years later. And really, there's not much talk about it anymore, but it is still an issue. And it was really a humanitarian situation that was unfolding, and they weren't getting the media coverage, they weren't getting the attention. And there were certain people who were suddenly they were paying attention, and they wanted to help the people of Palestine, Ohio. Most people probably haven't even heard of Palestine, Ohio, and they were pronouncing it Palestine. I haven't heard of Palestine, Ohio, frankly, until recently. And it took, getting some attention, getting some um, people making some noise on social media, getting some, quote unquote citizen journalists going out there and tweeting and trying to get attention and getting these people noticed, and maybe getting some politicians to pay attention as well. And then, I started seeing slowly but surely, I started seeing mainstream media start to cover the story in these big outlets. And the coverage wasn't bad. I think it was pretty nuanced. They were talking about policies, and they were talking about sort of the situation with train derailment is actually very common. So, not with toxic materials, hazardous materials, fortunately, but train derailment is a serious issue. There's a lot of deregulation that has been happening in the industry. Less trains are operated by humans. There's a lot of layoffs that have been happening in that industry, and yet massive profit. So has that been a contributing factor? Somebody brought up with me that there's been some additional investigations that showed that that was not a factor in this particular situation. So I'm not sure currently what the truth of what led to this, but this is what I'd like to focus on, is that eventually a story that was really much more human interest story, that was a pressing matter, where potentially the water was contaminated, the air. I heard from multiple reports that there was a scent in the air. There was not, fresh air. I heard that people were reporting that the masks were sold out to protect people's lungs. The water wasn't potentially drinkable. So there were all sorts of issues that were urgent and affecting the population. But what I started noticing is that the story became politicized. And ultimately, this started because at first, the people really paying a lot of attention and putting a lot of pressure and a lot of attention on the story, they were predominantly more on the right side of politics. And that's fine. I guess this is a more right, more of a red state, though it really shouldn't matter. People are people. But there was all this kind of conversation that started to kind of devolve around, well, Biden isn't sending any help, any assistance, but they sort of neglected to mention that the governor of the state has to declare a state of emergency before assistance can be made. So there started to be all this politicization and a lack of nuance in the conversation, and became very sort of dishonest and very politicized. And then, Pete Buttigier, I'm sure I'm saying his name wrong, the Minister of Transportation, maybe his response was taking too long, and he was potentially taking, he was taking some personal time. I don't know if that's factually correct or not, or whether he was just taking a stroll with his husband, and that was reported as personal time, regardless. He maybe didn't get to the location as fast as he should have or could have, But again, everything was politicized. But okay, I think it's fair game to criticize that and the actions. But there were suddenly I was seeing just a lot of homophobic remarks, and everything just in general became much more about an attack, about scoring political points. And then Trump announced that he was coming down to Ohio, and people who didn't like Trump, they criticized that as a political move, which, his actions do seem to indicate that it was, because he brought Trump water, which, some people say that it might be expired because it was discontinued in 2012. It was branded water, and he bought, as he said, more subpar water for some pallets, and he bought some McDonald's, about 30 meals or something like that, and then he handed out campaign hats. But you could also look at it this way. You could say, well, yes, he's campaigning, but he's also drawing attention to the region, because his presence there is going to get a lot of coverage. So you can look at it both ways. And the thing is, people polarize everything. Everything is just looked at one way or the other. There's just absolutely no nuance. But again, everything is looked at through the lens of politics, and not through the lens of this urgent need to help people. And I sort of find myself very frustrated with it, because the priority should be, okay, number one, right now, what are the issues? Is it the water? Is it the air? And what do we do? How do we address these issues? How do we help the people? What are the things that we need to do? Do we need money? Do we need to send cleaning supplies, machines? Do we need to send bottled water? Do we need money? Do we need equipment? What is it that we need to help people? That is priority number one. Once we've addressed that, then we can look at, okay, how do we prevent future incidents? What were the issues that have led to this? Not who do we blame? No. What are the issues that have led to this? How do we fix that? And only then, after we've addressed that, after we've resolved that, after we fix that, can we start maybe looking at who we blame. But to me, it feels like everything starts from who do we blame? And how do we score political points? How do we mess with our opponents? It's all a game. And it's not about the people. I feel like nobody really cares about the people. Or maybe if they did in the beginning, they stop. They very quickly turn into these like entertainment games. And it's frustrating to watch. It's really, really frustrating to watch. And it just descends into madness. But where it needs to start is the people. Where it needs to end is the politicians. I don't know what you think, but feel free to leave your comments below. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. If you disagree with me, you can leave your comments as well. I promise I won't delete them.